Chair. You had me there wondering what's going to happen with my 45 minutes of text. But I want to thank you. Um, so I'm going to skip the introductions, just to say that it's an honor to be, sitting alongside these folks here and among all of you, media comrades, ladies and gentlemen, and other distinguished people who have an interest in Caribbean society and maintaining liberation as a core theme of what we are here for. We gather today in Georgetown on the very soil from which Rickey Singh came to do something that is in truth somewhat overdue, but yet perfectly timed. We are assembled to honor a remarkable Caribbean journalist and to celebrate his induction into the Caribbean Broadcasting Union Hall of Fame at a time when journalistic skill and judgment are indispensably required to make sense of so much that is around us. It is thus abundantly evident that this tribute represents more than commendations in support of an award. It is about memory as constructed through first and second drafts of history. It is about public service through the journalistic creed to seek and speak truth. And it is about the responsibility of those who use words to help people understand themselves. In our region and certainly beyond, there are few better human representations of such pursuits than our late colleague. Guyana, from whence he came, has always been a country shaped by water. Yes, the often turbulent Atlantic, even deadly Atlantic, but equally so, it's rivers that carry more than boats and commerce, but also chapters of memory. If you have ever been able to wade through Wilson Harris's Palace of the Peacocks, you'll acquire an understanding of what he meant by palace and what he meant by the peacock. The Demerara, the Berbice, and the Essequibo, and all their various tributaries have witnessed empire, slavery, emancipation, indentureship, political struggle, and yes, independence. They have carried pain and sorrow from one generation to another, but they have also borne hope and aspirations. So too have the blades of grass that we are hearing more about today. These blades of grass and the trees reaching toward our so often troubled skies. It was from such a landscape and its accompanying peoplescape a young Rickey Singh emerged. He was born in Canal number 2 Polder, an agricultural community across the bridge, and these is it to take about an hour to get there. And he was born there on February the 1st, 1937. He lost his father before he had the opportunity to know him, and his mother while he was still a boy. Such losses can harden a human being. Such circumstances, national and in the changing and troubled world, at that time in the throes of global military conflict, can harden hearts and make people indifferent to human need and suffering. Kind of sounding familiar? In Ricky's case, they seem instead to have deepened compassion. This is reflected in his clear and persistent understanding of the loneliness of the vulnerable and the quiet courage of ordinary people. His mother, Jessie, had spoken out for women whose work was undervalued and whose dignity was too easily overlooked. She understood something that her son would carry throughout his own life, that injustice does not become acceptable simply because it has become customary or widely ignored. Again, sounds familiar? For more than 6 decades, Rickey Singh continued the conversation his mother had begun, but through his journalism, his activism, and his interpersonal relationships, with all due, of course, skepticism, strong personal convictions, and some of us were on the receiving end of his views on many things, and an unbending sense of right and wrong. He carried such a predisposition from the cane fields to newspaper offices, from government buildings to CARICOM summits, from the Caribbean to the wider world, all connected through the veins of history. Prime ministers and presidents heard, and most times, not all, listened to him. Diplomats understood where he was coming from and often referenced him. Journalists listened to him, and some wanted to be just like him. But so too did ordinary citizens of the Caribbean pay attention to Rickey. People who wanted someone to tell them honestly what was happening in the world around them. Martin Carter once wrote, "I do not sleep to dream, but dream to change the world." Those words speak to something fundamental about Rickey Singh. His journalism was never content merely to observe and report on the Caribbean. He wanted, through his work, to change the way we understood it. And in so doing, change the way we understood our responsibilities to one another. For Rickey, journalism was never a comfortable seat from which to watch history pass. It was participation. It was active citizenship. Carter gave us another brief but powerful reminder, part of the Rickey Creed. All are involved. All. Rickey Singh understood that instinctively. He knew that an election in Guyana could alter political thinking in Barbados. He knew that a constitutional crisis in Jamaica mattered in Port of Spain. He understood that the pain of Grenada, the uncertainty of Suriname, the aspirations of Belize, and the trials of Haiti were not foreign matters. They were part of the same Caribbean story. To him, and to me as well, I'm a strong advocate of the fact that the newsroom dichotomy of so called local and regional news was a fiction that omitted critical elements of a united Caribbean paradigm. Think of this in 2026. Take a minute to reflect on how correct he was. Indeed, such consciousness frames the quality of his journalism. Some reported what had happened. Rickey asked what it meant. Others described the crisis of the day. Rickey searched for its causes and its consequences. Others pursued the headline and the deadline. Rickey followed its impact on human history. He began as a young reporter at the Guyana Graphic, where the newsroom became for him a classroom, a family, and a platform from which to serve the public. Very early, he understood and he recognized that something that many of us take much longer to get. The Caribbean cannot be understood one territory, one island, or one headline at a time. The sea does not merely separate us, it connects us. The sky, in its limitlessness, establishes borderlessness and common ownership. That conviction found perhaps its most eloquent expression in the title of his celebrated newspaper column, Our Caribbean. Our Caribbean. The title itself is declarative of a region that belongs to all of us. That the farmer in St. Elizabeth, the fisherman in Guave, the teacher in Castries, the hunters of the Rupununi savannas, the steel pan arranger in Port of Spain, all belong to the same larger story. Rickey Singh invited us to see the region not as a collection of fragments, but as a community with shared responsibilities. In the story of the parts, he saw a sum that was greater even than the whole. In that sense, his journalism reflected the profound insights of that other great Guyanese I spoke about, Wilson Harris. Harris spoke of what he called the creative fusion of what is absent and what is present. That is also what serious journalism does. It searches for people and experiences that power chronically ignores. It listens for the voices that do not always enter official records. It understands that a country is not defined only by its leaders, its declarations, and its fancied ceremonies. It is also defined by workers, farmers, families, migrants, communities, and citizens whose experiences may never otherwise find their way into the official account. Rickey's recognition of this was reflected in his belief in the assertion of human rights as both universal and indivisible. His foundational activity with the Caribbean Human Rights Network proved the point at a time such as now, such as is required now, as a time such as now when rights had slid and have continued to slide in our region. Almost silently, off the agenda, no longer part of an indispensable developmental asset. The recently launched Rickey Singh Initiative for Excellence in Journalism, and Pedro, thank you very much for leading that effort within the Inter-American system, establishes important links connecting Rickey's journalism, his human rights advocacy, and his sense of a hemispheric space within which the Caribbean does not reside at the margins. We are nowhere on the outskirts. We are in it. We are of it. For our journalism, Harris also reminded us that partiality, a preference, a personal preference, discloses a wholeness one can never quite seize or capture. And there's a lesson in this for every journalist. And Rickey, at his often irascible best, some of us know him in that, I see Donna is at the back, would contend that no single article, including those produced by him, can contain the whole truth of a society. No reporter can explain every dimension of a crisis, but every honest account can contribute another piece to our understanding. These parts that I said that are greater than the whole. Derek Walcott reminded us that if we break a vase, we often realize that the love that reassembles the fragments is stronger than the love which took its symmetry for granted when it was whole. That, in a sense, is what confronts us today, 2026. Rickey Singh understood that journalism requires us to keep asking, keep listening, and keep searching for the missing pieces in order to reassemble them. At Caribbean Contact, which is where I first met him, he helped create a regional meeting place for ideas. It was a publication with limited resources but an enormous purpose. There's a current effort to have Rickey's collection. He has a personal collection of every single edition of the newspaper. And there's a current project to have that digitized, stored, and made available for all generations to come. In my view, this would constitute an enduring tribute not only to a late great Caribbean editor, but to an effort to engrave independent journalism as part of our region's institutional landscape. Though I am aware of interest by a Canadian university, here's an assignment for a Caribbean institution as part of a greater effort to capture memory as provided by media. And Senator Ember Charles reminded us of that challenge, the digitalization challenge that's before us and which we must engage and which we must capture. I think we have the resources to do it. We can do this. We have to capture memory and store it and make it available for all generations to come. You see, from the Port of Spain Office of Caribbean Contact, Rickey helped give shape to a regional conversation about politics, faith, social justice, democracy, and Caribbean identity. And he did something else that is perhaps even more important. He helped other people find their voices. Many young journalists and writers discovered their possibilities because Rickey Singh encouraged them. He saw potential before others saw achievement. I was part of one such cohort in the early 1980s because he understood that editing was not merely about correcting grammar or improving structure, but also about cultivating confidence and context rooted in unique Caribbean realities. He did not merely publish stories, he nurtured storytellers. That is a profound part of his legacy, that he helped construct a community of Caribbean journalists, one that needed to be cherished and protected. Then at Kana, the Caribbean News Agency, he partnered with and helped mentor many of today's media leaders and accomplished practitioners. Because he didn't merely compose and publish Caribbean journalism, he helped build institutional structures. As founding president of CAMWork, he helped give practical meaning to regional solidarity among media professionals and brought meaning to freedom of the press, even as media development required a stronger, more socially aware cadre of professionals. Significantly, he understood that press freedom required collective action that transcended territorial lines. The threats faced by journalists do not stop at national borders, and therefore the defense of journalism must cross those borders as well. Martin Carter had by then provided stark context in the admonition that a mouth is always muzzled by the food it eats to live. Through this, the lessons of silence achieved through fear and dependence and maybe even reward found expression in the inaugural tenets of the Kamuk Mandate and is there in the Rickey Singh initiative. Rickey Singh provided a living example of the costs of resistance. His criticism of authoritarianism in Guyana placed him in personal danger. Elsewhere in the region, work permits became problematic. Exile, uncertainty, and official displeasure became familiar companions. Yet he continued. He answered it to persistence and a refusal to surrender to self censorship. He chronicled the overthrow of Eric Gary and the revolutionary promise that captivated Grenada. He reported on the murder of Boris Bishop and the violence that followed in October 1983, paid the price for that. He wrote courageously about the assassination of Walter Rodney and refused to allow difficult questions to be buried beneath official explanations. He covered the attempted coup d'etat in Trinidad and Tobago in 1990, with constitutional democracy as a central theme of his reporting. Breaking news, we are all taught, is there as a first interpretation of occurrences that eventually become history. Journalism against such a backdrop is required to go beyond accounts simply of what happened. It should anticipate the questions that future generations will need to ask. Wilson Harris once explained that the block imprints of history need to be reopened. History, his work suggests, is not a static artifact, but a living entity that requires reopening and repackaging. You know, through the years, and I have to truncate this because I see some anxiety on the part of the chairman. But few of us really understood this more than the cadre of regional journalists who roamed alongside Rickey as they traveled and they trailed presidents and prime ministers from capital to capital. One or two of you are here in the room. You know what I'm talking about. But they were not members of an official entourage. They were there as journalists accountable to audiences interested in public disclosure and truth telling. Rickey earned our respect not through any acts of arrogance, but through experience and integrity. Had Rickey been with us this evening, he would not have enlightened this assembly with a discourse on the impact of technology. Because we know the problem is not really the technology, not the technology, but with an examination of how facts and truth remain constant fixtures on our journalistic agendas. And speaking of technology, and I can't end without this reference, some of us would recall when Kana introduced the Tandy PC in the 1980s. I don't know how many of you remember that. And Ricky's rather proud and very conspicuous proficiency at conference news centers on his Tandy. So it can be said that he was among the Luddite generation with a prolonged preference for manual and electronic typewriters. Yet he would be clear that while technology changes, ethics do not. Platforms change, but the obligation to verify remains. He wrote about politics, certainly, but he also wrote about people. He understood that public life is not made only in parliaments and conference rooms. It is made in villages and markets, schools and farms, churches and studios, newsrooms and family homes. He understood that the history of the region lives in ordinary experience. He did not belong only to one country, he belonged to the Caribbean. As we gather here in Georgetown, where the Atlantic meets the rivers, and where so many Caribbean journeys have begun, let us return to the image with which we began. The rivers continue their patient movement. They join distant places without asking permission. They carry memory quietly and persistently towards the sea. Truth moves in much the same way. It may be delayed, it may be obstructed, it may be denied, but if people are willing to protect it, truth continues to find a way forward. For more than 6 decades, the people of the Caribbean entrusted Rickey Singh with their stories. There can be no higher calling for a journalist, and there can be no finer tribute. Today, therefore, we honor not simply a journalist, we honor a regionalist, a teacher, a mentor, a builder of institutions, a defender of press freedom, and above all, a guardian of truth. Rickey Singh gave his life to the Caribbean, and the Caribbean is richer because of it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.